A California hospice had 97% survival rate. Let that sink in for a minute. A hospice where people go to die had a 97% survival rate. And their patients weren't dying because most of them weren't terminally ill. They were recruited off the street and they were paid $300 a month and free vitamins to pretend that they were dying and then billed to Medicare at $30,000 a head. And just this past week, the FBI showed up. And today, I'm going to show you how much money was stolen, how California's own oversight system sat on this for over 4 years, and why this is not a one-time story. It's a system-wide failure. So let's get into that first story right now. And here's the number that tells you everything that you need to know. St. Francis Palliative Care in Anaheim, over the last 5 years, their mortality rate was 2.3%. The national average for hospice patients is somewhere between 65 and 80% because hospice is where people go when they're dying. Yet somehow this hospice had a 97% survival rate. Because it's not a medical miracle, that's an entire billing scheme. And this past week, the FBI executed raids across Southern California as part of something called Operation Never Say Die. I give them credit for the kind of tongue-in-cheek kind of operation name. 15 defendants were charged, 8 were arrested so far, and the total taxpayer losses is more than $50 million. The Gills, Gladwin and Amelou ran St. Francis Palliative Care out of Anaheim, and FBI SWAT showed up to their home in San Dimas this past week, and they sawed through their metal front gates, announced over a loudspeaker that they had an arrest warrant. And according to the U.S. Attorney's Office, they submitted more than $5.2 million in fraudulent claims to Medicare. Medicare paid out over $4 million for services that were either not medically necessary or never provided at all. And here's how the scheme worked. The Gills paid illegal kickbacks to get patient referrals, and patients who weren't dying. In some cases, patients were allegedly paid $300 a month and offered free vitamins to sign up for hospice care they clearly didn't even need. Meanwhile, the Gills were billing Medicare $30,000 per patient, and they put that money toward mortgage payments, car payments, personal travel, dining out, all sorts of luxury items just for themselves. And federal prosecutors say they registered the hospice in their daughter's name to get around their own criminal histories. And here's what the money actually went to. It didn't go to patient care, it didn't go to medications, not end-of-life services, mortgage, car payments, travel, and food. $4 million in taxpayer money routed through a fake hospice into personal accounts. Now here's the part that California's mainstream press is already moving past. The FBI didn't stumble onto this recently. Search warrants were executed in 2022. 4 years ago, cases reportedly languished. California had until January 1st of this year to adopt emergency hospice regulations, and the state completely missed the deadline. I know, you're shocked. The FBI assistant director in charge of the LA field office said it plainly this past week. Southern California is a, quote, high-risk environment for hospice fraud. Not breaking news, not a surprise to anyone in the industry, just something nobody with enforcement authority in Sacramento actually chose to act on. So why did it take 4 years and a federal operation to make these arrests? Because California's oversight structure for hospice facilities created almost no friction for fraud. You could open a hospice, bill Medicare scale, and as long as the state wasn't looking, and it wasn't, the money kept flowing. And of course, I want to hear from you. Does it surprise you that this went on for 4 years without any sort of state action and nobody looked into this? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, because I think if you've been following this show long enough, it shouldn't surprise you at this point that there's any sort of rampant fraud going on in California and that the authorities just don't seem to really look into this. Now, the FBI assistant director said the United States loses hundreds of billions of dollars annually to healthcare fraud. Hundreds of billions of dollars every year. And the question that doesn't get asked enough was, where was California in all of this? And look at this timeline. Fraudulent activity starts between 2018 and 2022. Search warrants are executed in 2022. Then cases languish. State oversight does not act. California had an emergency hospice regulation deadline of January 1st, 2026, and they just missed it. Now, federal arrests begin to happen in April of 2026. 4 years between the first warrants and the first handcuffs, and it took a federal operation, not Sacramento, to get here. And real quick, if you're finding this useful, make sure you hit the subscribe and tap the bell so you don't miss the next one. If the story made you feel something, anger, frustration, stressed, I don't know, anything, a like does go a long way, helps with the algorithm, helps more people discover California Underground News. All right, let's get right back into the story. But here's the part that really got me. See, the Gills are not the whole story. They're one node in a much bigger network. You had 15 defendants charged recently, 9 separate fraud investigations, and $15 million across the entire operation. One of the other defendants, Nita Palma, allegedly ran 3 fraudulent hospices while she was incarcerated in federal prison, while in prison, and while out on bond for previous fraud charges. And then there's the building in Van Nuys, the Marabou Professional Medical Plaza. State Assembly member Alexandra Macedo says she found 197 hospices registered to that single address. 197 hospices in one address in Van Nuys. I mean, look at this building. 197 hospice facilities registered here, not operating here, registered here. And this is not an oversight gap. This is an invitation, because when your state's licensing and registration system allows 197 hospices to list a single commercial building as their address and nobody flags that, you don't have a healthcare system. You have a billing machine with a state seal on it. Because this is what happens when oversight becomes bureaucratic rubber stamping, when the incentive is to process applications and not to scrutinize them. When the accountability gap between a hospice license and an actual audit is wide enough to run a $50 million fraud through. The Gills didn't create this system, they just figured out how to use it. And for 4 years, while search warrants sat, while a regulation deadline came and went, while 197 fake hospices piled up at one Van Nuys address, the system let them. So that's what's broken. But here's what would actually fix it. The fix is automatic mortality rate audits, triggered anytime a Medicare billing hospice drops below a 20% mortality rate. Right now, CMS collects this data. They just don't use it as an automatic tripwire. And if they did, a hospice with a 2.3% death rate would have been flagged in year 1, not year 4. Arizona implemented real-time billing anomaly monitoring for Medicare providers back in 2021, and fraudulent claims dropped 40% in the first 2 years. The data already exists, and the trigger mechanism doesn't cost anything to build. What's missing is the political will to use it. And California could require this tomorrow, and the question is whether Sacramento decides that protecting Medicare beneficiaries is worth moving faster than a federal arrest warrant. But I want to know what you think. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you think that California has been willingly let this happen, do you think it's negligence, ignorance, all of the above? Let me know your thoughts. And if you're tired of media that picks a team before it picks the facts, make sure you're subscribed to California Underground News so you never miss a story. We'll see you on the next one. Later.